So let's get started with Louis Sullivan. I thought this would be easy, okay? And I ended up going through everything since yesterday, by the way. I gave a preview to everybody in good faith, okay? I was intending to do what I said I wanted to do. But then I started looking at Louis Sullivan, okay? And to me, it is always tough. And that's a characteristic of a great thinker. So I'm going to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 readings from other books before I go to the autobiography of an idea. So you can see the same idea expressed in multiple ways. Louis Sullivan is about 100 times more powerful in speaking about what I'm trying to talk about. Okay, so let's just listen to his words and then we will take comments. I'm going to start by describing the center. Okay, so the center right here. You know, we've talked about, how do you talk about the center? So I'm going to read from 2 books that he has. This is the giant book, by the way. This is System of Architectural Ornament, my most favorite book in my library. It starts off with a short diagram. It says, actually, let me see if I can bring that up. Give me a second. Okay, so this is what it says. The germ, the seat of power. Above is drawn a diagram of a typical seed with 2 cotyledons. Give me a second. The cotyledons are specialized rudimentary leaves containing a supply of nourishment sufficient for the initial stage of the development of the germ. So this is the center which has enough energy to grow out. The germ is the real thing, the seat of identity. Within its delicate mechanism lies the will to power, the function which is to seek and eventually to find its full expression in form. The seat of power and the will to live constitute the simple working idea upon which all that follows is based as to efflorescence. Okay, so this is the idea of the center. Now, I'm going to jump. Let me go back to my diagram. Okay, I'm going to jump to his book. So what I read was the beginning of his book, A System of Architectural Ornament. This was done on his deathbed in 1924. This book, Democracy, A Man's Search, was done earlier, I think around 1908 or so. This is the last chapter of this book. It's called Ego. And ego, in the terminology of Louis Sullivan, is the center. Okay, so just think of it as the center. The universe and all therein may be expressed by the word ego. The ancient Jews questioned their God Yahweh, asking, "Who art thou?" And he said, "I am." And because this was the first and the last word that the God could say of himself, so it is the first and the last word that man can say of himself. And man cannot logically say ego without including all ego, nor can he speak of an all ego without including himself. Ego therefore, is the I am of all things. It is for this reason that there can be no dividing line between what we call the physical and what we call spiritual. Man has found no line that he could cross and say, here it is. For go where he will, search where he will, there he finds consciousness. He speaks bravely of matter, but he can find no such thing. He speaks weakly of life, for he fears it. And yet, life is I am. Life sings its song. It is a song of ego. Man sings the song of death, a song of fear, the song of distrust, for he knows not the ego. He will not believe that ego is I am, and that there is but one I am, universal, and himself. This is the same idea of Atman and Brahman. He's a transcendentalist. This is the exact idea that we've been talking about of the center, but said so much more beautifully. No, man has not believed in integrity, hence his anguish. Man has not believed in himself, hence his sorrow. For man knows not ego. He talks of the gods, and he talks of the great. He talks of the rich, and he talks of the poor. But he speaks not of ego, because he knows not ego. Man teaches the child to fear, not knowing what he does, for he knows not ego. Man sends the child to school to learn what? Fictions, for the school knows not ego. Man takes the child to church to learn what? Fictions, for the church knows not ego. School and church speak not one word of integrity, as though it were not the primal law, the only law, the I am. Here are school and church phantom, for ego is real, and the spirit of man is ego. What pathos in man's self-inversion, his self-eclipse, that he should set up phantom of reality, shadow of light, and fear his own phantom and break his heart for it, and like a ghost walk his back to reality, as though reality were not ego. And man talks and talks and talks. Meanwhile, he kills his firstborn and the lastborn alike. Madman to be a grafter. For where there is graft, there must be ghosts and sorrow for you and yours, and perplexity and disease and poverty and huge ghostly riches. It cannot be otherwise. Madman to betray, madman to steal, madman to kill his young. There are your phantoms. Integrity alone is real. Man has grafted through the ages. He must now stop. It is the way out. It is the solution. It is fantastic to suggest that a social basis of any law, but the law of integrity, the law of ego. Man has thought otherwise throughout the ages and has paid the price. Man still thinks otherwise and is still paying the price. Hence his song of death and his dance of death. Hence his phantom by the door. Hence the wall, which he calls fate. Hence the crucifixion, now as of old, for it is graft, graft, graft. O man on the street, can you not see? Can you not hear? Can you not see the dance of death and hear the song of death? When they are so plain, and the cause of them so plain and near to you and off you, why walk? or pretend to walk in a trance. O man on the street, knowing not ego or denying ego, why be so absurd, so malignant, as to say you are sensible and practical? You are now parting of your ways. You are now at the parting of your ways. O man on the street, whoever you are, and whatever your name may be, high or low, rich or poor, eminent or obscure, your time has come. The cock is crowing, the shrillest dawn that the world has ever known. You must declare yourself, for you are found out, one and all. You must declare for integrity or against it. You must declare for social efficiency or against it. You must declare for an art and science of civilization or against it. When you cease to graft your thoughts, turn in splendor to your fellow men. The rest is easy because it is clear and straight. It merely means work, and to create, to construct, to build, and to put forth out of himself is man's natural work. It is the free and full expression of ego. A new world will open, the world of ego and its dream of power, the world of integrity of man and his works. Then will awaken in you poetry, long sleeping, and you will vision forth. Then will you do things right, because you will seek with unswerving attention and reflection how to do things right. Then will artist in you and the scientist in you awaken and be strong, whoever you are. Then you will go forth into the great open world. Then you will hear life sing its song of songs to you. Then shall you wish and will, and you shall become because of your wishing and willing. Then will the wall you have called fate tremble and dissolve. Then will the phantom by the door hover and go. Then will you know the use, for you will know man, the ego. The dawn is breaking. Now begin. Okay, now I'll take comments on this part. What do you guys think? Evanik.
I just have a question. What book was that from again?
This is a book called Democracy, A Man's Search. He writes only like this everywhere. Next up is Rupali.
So Shrikant, in the Gita, there is a story of the seed of the banyan tree. Now, the banyan tree is a large tree with many aerial roots that, form more trees. And if you go to a banyan tree, you'll see it's just a huge tree of many aerial roots. And the sage says to a child, he says, take a look at the seed of the banyan tree. And the seed is so tiny, it's like a little speck. And he says, now open the seed. And what do you see inside the seed? And the child says, nothing. And he said, but it's from this nothing that this entire banyan tree has grown. And that seed has the potential. Now, this was a story I probably read when I was in school, but it has always stuck with me. And when you showed the seed germ, the seed that every human has, every child has that potential. It just brought back that, story to me. And when I see it, I feel, every child has that potential. Every human being has that potential. And we just get caught up in the forms, labeling students or whatever, but not really looking at who they are. And I think Louis Sullivan does a phenomenal job in all of his books about saying, look at the center, look at the core. I also like the optimistic tone that he has. I feel this is the guide to the new spirituality that Yasuhiko talks about, that, now begin. Everything is here. Whatever we need is here. We have the freedom. Don't be enslaved. So I really like the positive, the life song, or the song of life. So thank you for sharing that. It was beautiful.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Rupali. Really appreciate that. I mean, his words, they are, Brian was saying that my words are not equal to the diagram. His words are better than the diagram. My diagram is not good enough. So it's like that's what you do. It's like you have this way of learning where you kind of take in something like this and saying, okay, how can I match it, with whatever abilities I have. Thank you. Next up is Brian.
I have a quick comment, and then Penny does too.
Sure.
Wow, I was just, first of all, I think Rupali captured beautifully. I like what she said. What I was just amazed, I haven't read a lot of his work. I was amazed, and what struck me is, how could one person say just what is necessary to capture this idea, and then in the end say, now begin, indicating that what he said is not just, he's not said just the necessary, and what he said is complete. To me, that was just an amazing moment.
Thank you, Brian. Look, I've been looking at Louis Sullivan for a couple of decades. He is just like that throughout all his work, all his art. He's like that. So we've done many meetups. So there is an introductory meetup that Sherry and I did. That's a good place to start. And he's just incredible. Penny.
Okay. What I wanted to say, I actually have not read much of Louis Sullivan either, but recently I finished reading Outwitting the Devil.
Mm-hmm.
And that passage from Louis Sullivan kind of, I think, is basically the whole book of Outwitting the Devil. It says all the key ideas of that book about, people being led astray, people being fearful, our institutions, the schools, and religion leading people astray in the devil's way. And but there is the other way,
Yes.
which is people, seeking their own path, thinking and motivating themselves and moving forward. I just was struck at how
Absolutely.
it was almost the same thing as that book, but in like a paragraph.
Let me draw it for you, Penny. Penny, that's a great example. We went through the entire book, Outwitting the Devil, chapter by chapter. So it is essentially saying this is the heart of the entire book. And by the way, it is a fantastic book. I recommend it very highly. Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. That was his best book. And it was not published for 75 years. It was written in 1935. It was published in 2010 because it was regarded as controversial. What he's saying is that you have two choices. This is what he calls drifting. This is what he calls definite purpose. So you either go towards your center, go towards the truth, or you drift. That's it. That's really the heart of the choice that you have. That's exactly what Louis Sullivan is saying. And it's the same theme. It's exactly these two directions. This is the devil. This circle is the devil. And outwitting the devil, all you have to do is to go this way. Because the devil will ask you to go this way. If not, he says, go this way. just go with things which are right next to you. But if you go this way, the tangent goes right into the, you'll go in the same place. So it is drifting versus this one. So fantastic observation. All right, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and continue on. So this was all just saying now begin. Okay, so now we are really beginning the meetup. Okay, so I'm going to start. There are 3 presentations on man's powers. So now we're saying that this is the core of man, and he has all these different powers, and they're all kind of flowing out from him like this, and they are supporting it, they're bringing it back to the core. So it's this movement. They're all connected to each other. So there is a swirling movement going towards the center, and there is a choice. You have a fundamental moral choice between this and this. We have it so far. Okay, so now he's going to start talking about man's powers. So I'm going to read 3 different versions of it. First one is from A System of Architectural Ornament. The second one is from Kindergarten Chats. Both these are relatively smaller. And then I'm going to talk about just one quick, I'm going to read one quick page from System of Architectural Ornaments. And then we're going to go into Autobiography of an Idea. All right. So this is about man's powers. Okay. In somewhat cursory way, we have insistently spoken of man's powers as originating and contained within himself. That is, not given from without or from above through any process of magic, benevolence, dispensation, or any selective choice. So he's saying all of us have the core. In other words, it is desired to be understood that such powers are natural. So they are part of you. Even when dormant, suppressed, inarticulate, they are potential. It is now insisted. So this is an important point. Even when dormant, suppressed, or inarticulate, they are potential. So this is the same point of the God in you greets the God in me. God in me greets the God in you. So you're saying you have Atma, you have a soul, you have a will. And that is the foundation of our interaction. So even when it is not expressed, it is there. And that's a natural part of us. That's the potential we all have at all times, no matter where we are, how far advanced or how not advanced. We have that potential within us to say, I am. It is now insisted that genius is potentially universal. Okay, now this is huge. He's saying you can do it. Okay, this is not just one person, not a special person. This is accessible to anybody and everybody. This is universal. A serious, costly, and the most reactionary, wasteful, and suppressive defect in education, in the education of all of us, except the really free spirits, lies in this, that the affirmation of man as a newly discovered, normal, self-regulating power has been regarded as a little short of heresy. So the fact that we have a center is regarded as a heresy. Whereas, in fact, such affirmation is of that truth which shall make actually rather than idealistically for freedom is the chief factor in the program, Man, Know Thyself. This is the heart of Know Thyself. Now, with minds reasonably free from current superstition, surviving traditional faith in multifarious magical formulas together with concurrent homage paid to phantasms and mirages, let us regard man's powers in a simple, informal way. So let's stop looking at the mirror's frame. And now let's try to look in the mirror. Let us try to visualize, in a measure, the natural man, the seat of genius. So who am I? As a convenient fiction, man's integral, interfluent powers may be grouped separately and isolated, each as physical, emotional, intellectual, moral, and spiritual, as though such were the fact. So look at how he's saying it. He's saying, I'm dividing this into 5, but these are interfluent powers. They are one, like virtue is one. You can divide them for convenience of talking about it, but they are integrated. They overflow into one another, using Aquinas' term. But in pursuing such method, it is ever to be borne in mind that a living power, not an idealistic abstraction or non-entity, is to be dealt with. So this entire thing in the center is a swirling motion. Okay, there is a motion going from the center to the edge along each it's basically light going back and forth. And there is a light swirling from each of these parts to the other. We shall premise this part of our discourse with affirmation that the word negative is devoid of valid natural meaning, that the word positive is a universal, all-pervading symbol of power. This is the same point about saying yes to life, yes to yourself. Or this is what Yasuhiko yesterday was saying, is fundamental affirmation of reality. You're saying yes to reality. It is what it is. I am what I am. That is the starting point. As to the groups of power to which we have alluded, they may be outlined as follows. Group 1. Physical powers are well known, chiefly for our purpose. They are body growth and conservation, muscular control, locomotion, the power to do things, to effect change, and to create situations. So that's this over here. No, sorry, just a second. That is this over here. So this loop that he's talking about as physical powers. Group 2, the intellectual group starts in the power of curiosity and ends in highly sophisticated manipulation. In this group are found the powers of observation, of memory, reflection, and of reasoning. And by reasoning, we mean construction of a diagram or a model purporting to show how curiosity works to satisfy its craving for orderly form. Okay, so he's talking about our diagram. Okay, he's saying that he's now talking about this. Just a second. So he's talking about this loop. Engaging of the mind, the intellectual group. Group 3, the emotional group. The emotional group embraces every impulse, every power of feeling, an enormous volcanic complex, the basis of action, especially spectacular action, private and public, secret and open. It is the instinct, it is of instinct. It is the great power that moves the people of the world, even as they are busy denying it, even as they exalt intellect to the rank of a fetish. So now he's talking about this one. I'm going to skip to group 5 first and then go to group 4. Group 5, the spiritual group. The spiritual group functions as a super quality in clarity of vision. It sees as in a dream. It feels as in the depth of instinct. It is a power hidden, calm, quiescent in wilderness of being, serene in its vast solitude, alert in its piercing intuitions, utterly aware of life, contemplating the mystery, keen to the open power of life, consenting and contented that life is a dream within a greater dream, and that man himself is a dreamer within the dream of life. Then, as in a dream, spirit contemplates spirit, life contemplates life, man contemplates man. Especially does spirit contemplates its own vast powers, for it is veritable ego. Equally does it concentrate its vision on mankind, on man himself, man physical, intellectual, emotional, moral, spiritual, to awaken the man as by the call of a transcendent chanticleer in the dawning hour, to consciousness of himself, to a realization of his own nature and his own powers, to evoke his kindness, his faith, and his courage, to dispel his fear. So this is your ability to focus and create beautiful expressions that capture the center of being. Let me go ahead and do the right portion here. Okay. Now, number 4. This is the last group. The moral group. The moral group, the great stabilizing power, much misunderstood and little used by men, turned into trivialities by them, unknowing that it is the central power. Its central power of free will choice is the axis of man's being, the determinant of his character. That upon the soundness of his choice, individually and collectively, rests the issue whether he shall continue to be tyrannized by fate or shall assert and stabilize his freedom, his integrity, and thus create and control his destiny. To face this task is one great adventure of our day and the day to come. It is the world's hope, the passionate desire that now stirs in the hearts of men. Yet to be free, man's spirit must liberate and organize his instinctive powers. His intellect has held them too long in bondage. He must recognize and utilize the broad truth that fate has ever been himself, that destiny now lies within himself. Hence, his choice, the most potent of his moral powers, the deepest moral truth is this, that the power of choice resides in all men. So this is saying that we have the center, which is where everything is initiated from. That if you do not have that I am is your moral power. That is the starting point of building life. Now I'm going to read a little bit more from this of how he uses these powers. So he has just listed the powers. Now I'm going to read about how he uses it. This is from the introduction to this whole thing is from the introduction to this giant book System of Architectural Ornaments, my favorite book. The purpose of setting forth man's powers in groups is to show their conjoint power in practical affairs, their mutual reinforcement of each other's power. Okay, so see how he's constantly showing you how these intermingle, that how you need all of these. The physical man may be called the worker, the artificer. The inquiring man becomes the scientist. The contemplative, speculative man becomes the philosopher. The emotional man dramatizes the activities, he colors life. The moral power of man urges on towards freedom or democracy, the great dream. The dreamer man becomes the seer, the mystic, the poet, the prophet, the pioneer, the affirmer, the proud adventurer. He dreams his dreams with open eyes, with clear vision of realities, with far foreseeing outlook, with intense, persistent concentration upon an idea, a purpose. His power utilizes and manipulates all powers, focusing their aim on a program of genuine achievement. And thus the physical man, the artificer, becomes stronger by the virtue of inquiry and science, stronger still through added emotion, dramatization, stronger still through the stimulus and support of philosophy, stronger still through the tonic of moral poise as expressed in human responsibility and accountability. And thus he reaches the summit of his powers when all these incremental powers are enfolded in his dream of creative power. And he rises to the heights of that utterly simple artificer, that super manipulator who materializes his dreams in the everyday world for the good of mankind. For man's powers are not to be taken as abstractions, as separated names or figures of speech in books and talks, but as compelling evidence of man's true nature. For in his intimate, dramatic situation, we are confronted in thought by the astounding fact that throughout all history, man has neither really been sought nor really found. To seek and find man is the modern adventure, an undertaking quite attainable if the method is simple and the spirit free. The trail of man's simple powers leads with many windings through the jungle of complexities we call civilization. It broadens and straightens as we follow the scent of what man has left behind him in thought and deed. We suddenly side glimpsing the man of today and what he thinks and does, the man of today in the man of the past, and the man of the past in the man of today. And as we trudge onwards through the phantoms and obscurisms of our preconceptions, because urged on by impulsion of discovered fact, and or perhaps eagerly, if clear-headed and self-willed, and as illusion after illusion falls from us, and as wail after wail rises from before the apparition of our fears, man, the reality suddenly appears to our utter dismay or utter joy that man is not what our kind for so long had believed him to be and still believes him to be. So the last wail lifts and the reality man is found sound to the core, the quintessence of power, the dreamer of dream, the creator of realities, the greatest of craftsmen, a master craftsman. The modern dream, obscured and inarticulate as yet, is to be found on the reality, on man and his powers, a civilization befitting him and his powers. Thus dawns the modern light upon the art of the world, it reveals that all men in their native power are craftsmen, whose destiny it is to create courageously, wisely, and worthily a fit abiding place, a sane, beautiful world. And thus does nature of universal art begin to emerge within the glow of this modern light. With this brief impressionistic sketch of man's powers, constantly to be borne in mind by the student, we shall now begin to set forth a specific aspect in the technical form of the application of such powers to material things. And that's what this book is about. This is just telling you what the book is going to do. And the book actually does that. All right. So I'm now would like your comments on what you just heard. Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to give comments. We'll start with Joe.
So for me, I think the most, I mean, in the beginning, when he talks about man's self-regulating power, essentially it's the ability to think for himself and rational thinking. And I think in a way, this is all speaking to consciousness. What does it mean to be a conscious being? To be able to create your own reality. And this, the power of choice. And then he breaks it down into each one of these groups, which is, you know, this kind of speaks to our ability to have free will.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way I look at this is essentially then we have a choice to move towards all the things that you've captured here in the diagram. And so, yeah, he's talking about us as being conscious beings and self-aware. So
Cool.
that's
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Anybody
the
else?
diagram captures that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's really wonderful how whatever he's saying just maps directly. And this was just a very quick look at it. There are more detailed looks at the same thing through his other writing. Go ahead, Rupali.
Shrikant, could you tell me what the third group is called?
Give me a second. The first one was physical. Second one was intellectual. I think the third one was emotional.
Emotional. Okay, thank you. So these powers, right? The first one, the physical powers where you are actually doing, he calls it the worker. And then you have the intellectual powers to think, reason, and then he says you have to go beyond reason in the realm of imagination. And from there, you find your creative self. And while doing that, one of the powers is the power of character. So the moral group that he talks about and the spiritual group of focus and beauty, because once you are integrated, then he says the work that you do reflects the person that you are. So that's how this whole integration comes to be. And what I think about the things we're learning in Bhagavad Gita, you know, is the Dhyan Yoga, which is the knowledge, the thinking group, the intellectual group. The Karma Yoga, which is the power to do things and the action that we take. So the physical powers, and then the Bhakti Yoga, which is the emotional powers. So I think the spiritual powers that he talks about are both between the Bhakti Yoga as well as the Karma Yoga. It is that triangular diagram that you first had where your actions are going in that triangle because you are an integrated self. And I just have this as an observation, nothing more than that. But it just brought together all the diagrams and are talk in Bhagavad Gita meetup. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Rupali. I'm going to read very quick. Oh, Brian, go ahead.
So at the risk of seeming to be the flatterer, I would like to point out that if I had read that introduction, I probably would have blown past it and missed the significance. And because I would, okay, I'm focused on what is the technique he's going to give us in the book. And that all the rest would be preamble. But so kind of my focus would be peripheral. But I just want to recognize that that you recognize the wisdom in his thoughts. You did not blow by this introduction. And how does that happen? I think that of these powers, you have this central, you have other powers, but clearly a very strong central moral power, which enables you to recognize thoughts, let's just say in the first instance, random thoughts, but you recognize them as wisdom and you pull them into this integrated whole. So I think that what you've done with this introduction is just another example of how to understand this chart and how very powerful the chart is.
Well, thank you, Brian. Really appreciate it. My reaction when I'm reading Sullivan is exactly opposite, because it's like I'm saying, look at what human beings can do. Like, look at his words and how well he can actually capture what I'm doing in drawing. And it's like saying, okay, how can I make, so to me, like reading Sullivan is an experience of, it's kind of like reading anything great, that you get something at certain level, and then when you work on it, and when you work on it, you kind of internalize some of it. And then when you come back to it, you see the next level. And I've been at it for like 20, 30 years, something like that. And it's still kind of fresh, and it is still very powerful. And I shudder to think, I'm going to actually go through this book in the next week, and which is about design. And I'm going to try to apply it to the diagram. So it's like, I've not even begun to apply it to the diagram yet. So it's just wonderful for me to be able to actually see something like this, like Sullivan. And, and it's just great to be able to share it with people who appreciate it as much. And I think that the diagram is making it easy, because it is easy to communicate these things. Because if you look at his words, they're very flowery. And in the past, what people have feedback, whenever I've recommended that to other people, they've said, okay, what is he actually saying? But now I can actually draw for people and say, oh, he's saying that, okay, this loop here goes like this. And this is like, man, the worker is right here. Man, the worker is right here. And he's saying that all the wisdom that you're doing is going to add to this loop that you're doing here. And that your ability to kind of project things as you build that is also going to add. Your devotion is also going to add. Your love of others is also going to add to it. So I can just simply draw it for them now. So it is so amazing. But I think that by the time I'm done with Sullivan, in this first pass, I think we're going to get more of the diagram, because I think it, he has so much. You should look at some of his diagrams. So this is, I want to show you one of his diagrams from the book. This is one of my favorites. Let me see if I can hold it up. So this is his diagram. You can take a screenshot. No, wait a minute. I'll stop sharing. That'll make it easier for you to see it. Okay, let me put this on speaker view. Okay, so this is what he does. You see, these are some of his drawings. And this is just one drawing. I want to show you like how he says, look, there are many ways of showing kind of basic axes interacting with one another. So this is his example of that. This is my favorite one for that. So he's saying, he's saying that there are these three motives that I have at the top, and I can combine them at different levels of emphasis in this way. So I think that's the kind of thing that is where I need to go to next. But that's on this. So thank you very much. Appreciate your comment. What I want to do now is I want to read one last point here from the system of architectural ornament, just to show you the depth at which you can think about, that you can think about this thing. Let me get back my diagram. Just a second. Share screen. Start broadcast. Okay. There. Okay. Just a second. I need to set this up right. Okay. All right. So this is in the middle of the book. This book is full of actual illustrations. This is called System of Architectural Ornaments. You see, how do you implement these things in architectural design? That's what it is about. But the principles apply to any design, anything that you're making. Okay. So this is the interlude, and he calls it the doctrine of parallelism. We have now progressed to a point where it seems necessary and opportune to make a brief review of progress. The prelude, hold on, I need to, just a second, I need to mute, okay. All right, thanks. The prelude, that's the introduction, we read a part of that prelude. The prelude to which the series of plates set forth in literary form man's natural powers as the foundation of his deeds. The prelude to the series of plates sets forth in literary form man's natural powers as the foundation of his deeds. Then begins, as illustrated in the plates, the development of a technical thesis with the objective in view of exposing these powers in action as applied to specific form of activity called architectural ornament. So he's saying now, that's what the book is about. How do you build all of these? How do you build the spiritual, emotional, intellectual, physical, and moral into your design? How do you do that? That's what the book is about. The outworking of the thesis as a science and as an art is necessarily technical in as much as it involves a new conception of energy. Okay, the new philosophical and practical deduction therefrom. Okay, he's just saying that. Okay, there is a concept of energy and how energy actually flows, because it's not about forms. You have to understand how energy naturally flows, and you're trying to design based on that. The theme is therefore exploited analytically and synthetically, differentially and integrally, with the object ever in view of so humanizing the science that it energizes art, and so exhibiting the masterful fluency of art that in turn illuminates science. Between science and art, there appears at first view a sense of separated parallel activities. Such mental picture of them softens as the Euclidean sense of parallel gradually enters a seemingly nebulous domain, which we call parallelism. It were better and truer to call this domain mystic, for within it art, science, philosophy fuse, as it were, into a single vital impulse. And that's what we are trying to do with the diagram, that these multiple things, which are normally thought of as separate, we are trying to explore them together and trying to see the connections between them. Leonardo was very big on this, like the science and art, that he would do his science using the best of his art, and he would use the best of his science in shaping his art. And they kind of fused together to produce something where people were just astounded by saying, what is this? And how is this possible? It were better and truer to call this domain mystic, for within it, art, science, and philosophy fuse as if it were a single vital impulse. In this same sense, the inorganic and organic, seemingly utterly apart, are caused to enter this same domain of parallelism and fuse and blend into integral phenomena, this time by the powers of man's imaginative will. It may here be injected that imagination is the greatest of man's single working power, and the trickiest, as the intellect is the frailest and the most subject to derangement, and the most given to cowardice and betrayal, unless it be held steady and sane by the power of instinct. The power of intellect is valid beyond a doubt, but folly comes when it is allowed to usurp dominion over instinct. The chief exhibit of intellect is logic, but the process of instinct involves a logic infinitely more subtle and intuitive, much more powerful because primordial. It is to this diaphanous, labile logic of intuition, ever operative and perceptible as processes involving certitude and finality, that the free spirit of man inclines through sympathy with life. For life is of this transcendental logic and exhibits it first to the instinct and then slowly thereafter to the intellect of man. This is the idea of artists being the harbingers, first grasping things which are at the edge of their consciousness through their intuition and their ability to show it, and then philosophers kind of figuring it out, explicitly figuring things out. Such considerations open to view a still larger domain of parallelism, namely the parallelism between man and nature, between man and his works. So parallelism between man and nature and between man and his works. This is a point that Rupali was making about what you make reflects who you are. These are self-contained within the all-embracing domain of life, the universal power or energy which flows everywhere at all times, in all places, seeking expression in form, and thus parallel to all things. Man stands, by the virtue of his powers, a solitary ego within the universe of energy, a witness, a participant, and by the virtue of his powers, a co-creator. His creations are but parallels of himself. It has been deemed urgent to devise this literary interlude because to evidence its varied suggestions apart by graphical illustrations would require space beyond the limits of this work. However interesting it might be to an advanced student to observe a scientific poetic theory, or rather conviction, gradually unfold itself to the physical eye. It is to this inner eye, therefore, that very considerable part of the appeal must perforce be made. Therefore, what this work may lack in scientific continuity of gradual illustrations must be compensated by continuity in sensibility and thought by the student. Such process may proceed either way, as a sentient development on an intellectual background, or as an intellectual development on a sentient background. The illustrations may be traced back to their primitive origins, or the primitive origins may be followed in their expanding development. So I just want to point out, how he thinks. So any comments on this point about parallelism? Rupali. Oh, sorry. Rupali, go ahead.
Thanks. So this whole idea about the will, right? And the idea that there is this mystic center in every one of us, because it has the power to do, to create, to think, to imagine. It reminds me of the idea in Maria Montessori's philosophy of the spiritual embryo. She calls it the spiritual embryo, another word for a seed.
Mhm.
And, the whole idea in Montessori is to look at the child as a spiritual embryo, that it has all these possibilities and potentials. So this description that you just read, I felt it was very much similar to Maria Montessori's work. And what Louis Sullivan is saying is a person who is grounded, is stable at the core, at the center, then everything that the person does manifests in an integrated way according to the core. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rupali. Next up is Joe.
So the parallelism is kind of like, I look at the art and science as similar to being like the philosophy of mind, where
So art and science, he's talking about this relationship of this and this. That's what he's talking about.
right. So but they're interrelated.
Yes.
The inner relationships between the two. So you kind of have, like, in philosophy of mind, is like the mental and the body, the physical. So you kind of have is it similar?
Joe, we can't go into philosophy of mind because that's like
Okay.
a whole can of worms.
Okay,
So
I was just saying
I'll
that.
do a full critique of bad ideas, good ideas, all of that, and trying to figure it's impossible.
Okay, or even just logic and instinct, and how these two are interrelated.
By instinct, he actually means kind of, this. So basically, he's looking at this. He's saying that, look, there is this entire side here, and there is this entire side here. So this
Okay.
is like intuition. This is intuition and feelings. And he's saying this is kind of sensing, acting, and thought. And he's saying these kind of go together, and they kind of build on one another. Like, people think of them separately, but if you think of them together in here, that's what you're doing. They basically build one another, and they go to a completely new level when that happens.
And then he's saying the same thing with art and science, like, essentially.
Yes, I mean, art and science is a short form for that. I mean, his language is poetic, so it's quite a bit of work to kind of figure out exactly what he's saying. I mean, he knows what he's talking about, but he expresses it in a poetic way. So here he's talking about, basically he's talking about these connections that, all your faculties have to come together in order to do great work. Like, for example, like, role of imagination in science is critical.
Right.
Like, people immediately think of science as deductive. Okay, I have this, I'm just going to deduce this. That's not science. Science requires saying, what is it? What is it? What is it? And maybe this is it. And that kind of coming up with that, and then going back and forth and testing it, all of that, that's, so it, it speaks to that. Okay, next up is Brian.
So I chimed in because I didn't want that passage to go away without comment, that's, I mean, it's another example of how amazing he is.
Yes.
And I'm really looking forward to exploring him more. I would also say, like, as is illustrated by Rupali's comment, you know, there's the indication of some of his brilliance is also in the fact that other brilliant creative people you know, captured in history were thinking in very similar lines. It's just so striking to see it pointed out. And and then finally, Penny and I need to run for the Mother's Day party. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a shorter piece now on the kindergarten chats, and maybe autobiography we can hold off for later. So we'll do like one more pass, a shorter pass on man's powers, what he says about this in kindergarten chats. Okay. And then we will do, so we'll do this, and then we'll just do a conclusion, any kind of concluding thoughts. So I really want to hear what you guys got from this. So immediately after this, we can go into kind of concluding thoughts, okay? So this is about man's powers as presented in kindergarten chats. If feudalism, let me see here. If feudalism can be defined as a selfish activity of the ego, and freedom as altruistic activity of ego, these terms are all mixed, you know. If the word ego now stands at the determining power, and if the word ego now stand as the determining power of all of man's powers, let us briefly examine these powers in order to clarify our shaping conception of democracy, of democratic art, and of democratic education. So by democracy, he means freedom. He means something which is consistent with each individual being free. And by feudalism, he means that the person who you do not even think about yourself, you just look at other people and say, what are they doing? What is society doing? So that is feudalism. And all your actions are shaped by that. And on every one of these things, you know, you're basically operating like this. That is feudalism. And what he calls democracy is really freedom, that this acting from here. So those are the two options that he's talking about it there. Let us assume that the elementary education methods have developed much that is praiseworthy. Let us also assume that the higher education is still tainted with feudal ideas and academic abstractions. Let us assume that there coexist two conceptions of the function of education, one utilitarian and opportunistic, and the other liberal and essentially philosophical. Let us assume that the man is both flesh and spirit. Okay, so he's saying man is both, this is spirit and this is flesh. That man is a being like this, that is going like this. Let me see here. Okay. Let us assume that man is a moral being. So that is acts from here. Let us assume that man is not alone, that this is there in each of us. Finally, let us assume that all the above assumptions are self-evident and valid. Now we'll posit that all man's powers are subjective in the sense that they derive from the ego. So like internal, they're driven internally. The human will starts from within you and are aspects of ego in action. Let us group these activities in order that they may begin to form an idea of the nature of man. Man's powers means simply what man can do. Therefore, let us now see what man can do. What are his powers? As to his physical nature, man has the power of locomotion, muscular control, the power to select and manipulate other things, other objects, to surmount obstacles, and therefore by his nature, a wanderer, a toiler, a worker, an artisan, an artist. For these things mean the power to do, power to create. So he's mostly focusing on this area here. Just a second. Mostly focusing on this area here. As to his mental nature, man has the urging power of curiosity. Hence, he is again a wanderer, an explorer, a seeker, an inquirer, a scientist. He wishes to know the how. Hence, is his power to do increased by his knowledge how to do. His art is strengthened and amplified in its power by his science. Further, man's curiosity wishes to discern the why. Still a wanderer, a seeker, a worker, a thinker, he pushes his power of inquiry into new paths. He becomes philosopher. His thus acquired knowledge of the why increases his power over how and his power to do, which means a progressive cumulating growth in solidarity, his philosophy, his science, his art mutually strengthening each other. Thus man, the worker, the inquirer, the thinker, becomes ever more unitary in the exercise of his power. He becomes the greater worker. But his results thus far may be purely material, strictly utilitarian, altogether objective in the ordinary sense. The exhibit of his power thus far in action may be purely intellectual and physical, surely a one-sided aspect. So what he's saying is that he's saying, just a second. So these are all the thinking powers. This is application of thinking to action. And so far he has described all the powers on this side, which in the Jungian functions is sensory functions and thinking functions. That's what he has covered so far. And he's saying that this is kind of more objective things that human beings can do. But man has a power of feeling, of emotion, great powers of his inner life. Hence man is the poet. The man has to vision forth. Hence he becomes dreamer of dreams, spectator of visions. So emotional powers are largely here. And he's now going to be talking about this. Sorry, I should not be doing this. Like this and like this. This is what he's trying to cover. And man has to thus, has the vision, has the power to vision forth. Hence, he's the dreamer of dreams, spectator of vision, the prophet. His emotions, his dreams, his visions, his forecasts vitalize his thinking, his speculations, and his work. They charge his creations with the current of life. So man rises in accomplished power. He ever pushes back the frontiers. He ever intensifies the near and the far. The man is a spirit. Hence his emotion, his intellectual, his physical need to find union with spirit. Thus grows he ever in concentrating and diffusing power. And man is a moral being, a power of enormous momentum. It is the power to choose, the central power of the ego. So now he's talking about the center itself. We might go on indefinitely enumerating man's minor powers by a continuous process of subdivision of his major powers, exhibit man for what he is, a fecund marvel of power, and all would seem to be well. But all is not well. There is a fly in the ointment. For the inquiry immediately emerges. What does man do with these powers? Here lies the heart of our inquiry into democracy. He calls it democracy. I always think of it as freedom. So I'm just going to read it as freedom, because democracy is not, I'm not able to grasp what he's saying with that. So it's like, it's basically what, a state of freedom between people, between free people. Here arrives the most urgent of all human inquiries. Its process and result we call sociology, which truly is the art and science of the gregarious man, the dream of the solitary dreamer, the visionary, the prophet, the world-old inarticulate dream of ever-dreaming multitudes. Thus, it is the unitary science, poem, the drama of sociology, and precursor to freedom, its explorer, evangelical. So let me see here. Okay, for reverting to our definition of feudalism, is it not instantly visible that all the wondrous powers of man may be used individually or collectively for harm, that such use may be directly unsocial as we are coming to understand the term? Hence loom the power of choice before us, man's mightiest power for good or for ill. That is, in fact, man's power in his supreme constructive power. So let me just summarize this because it's a complex point. The point is of feudalism versus freedom. Feudalism means that you take what is out there that has already been constructed, what we call the frame, as given, and you use all your powers in order to support it and to work off it. Freedom means to live authentically. It's to keep going back to the center and keep acting from the center. It is creating the world anew, looking at things and saying what should be, and building that life. That's what it is about. So the rest of it is not directly about the powers. It is about the social implications. But the core thing is that of the inverted self. So I want to summarize by saying that really what he's saying is that you can either take periphery as your starting point, or you can take as your anchor, or you can take your center as your anchor. You know, Naneshwar talks about this, Yogeshwar talked about this, the example of the parrot sitting on a branch, holding on to the branch. To combine the metaphors here, you know, we are parrots sitting on a branch, and we have closed our eyes to who we are and what our condition is. So that is looking into the mirror. You know, we are refusing to look at who we are, that we are parrots, that we have wings, that we can fly. When you close your eyes as a parrot, only thing that you have is you are holding on to the branch. So this feudalism is all about holding on to the branch, whatever is familiar in every, you know, in your thoughts, in your habits, in your interactions, your emotions, everything. You're holding on to the habits because you've turned away from the source of power which is within you. You've turned your eyes away from your own self, your own center. So that is really what he's saying. But now I want to, you know, I've gone on for a long time, and I want to get kind of overall reactions to this, to everything that was said about Louis Sullivan, and what do you think? So any comments are welcome at this point. So we will start with Joe.
So just a really quick comment off based on what you were just talking about. You can really clearly see form follows function come into being.
Oh yes, sorry, Joe. Let me go ahead, and I did not talk about form follows function.
Yeah, you just explained it as far as, I mean, you just really captured it.
Yeah, so function is right here. Okay, function is right here at the center. Just a second. Function is right here at the center. This is the action of the function creating the form, and the form, the kind of form you create supports the function. If you do not watch out, the forms that you yourself have created go out like this, away from the center. The forms that other people have created may or may not, in order for them to be useful, you have to integrate it with the function in order to bring them here. And then there are forms which are pointed exactly that way. But form follows function is this loop, relentless loop. And the crucial thing to understand is it's like function is life, and form is the organism. So there is the tree, which has life. Life is the force that is animated in the tree, and it is being expressed to the tree. And the form actually is supporting the function. The tree, the leaves, the roots, the stems, the branches are all enabling life. So there is this loop of going back continuously. So form follows function. You cannot understand function without forms. You cannot understand forms without functions. It's one thing. So this, and that's the mirror. That's who you are. Of this form follows function. That's what you are. That is life. That is looking at yourself in the mirror. That is, and looking at anything outside of it is you are turning your back on yourself, on your function, as well as your form, your life. Go ahead, Joe. Sorry about the interruption.
No, I mean, I appreciate that. And I think that this whole idea, like, one of the things that obviously had come to mind was this idea of second-handers, and where you are operating and letting the world inform you as to what you were going to be. And that's the outer part. Whereas a part to democracy is this search for character as you move towards the middle, the center, and that's the inner freedom that you can then realize. And what you realize out of that is that your life begins to have purpose. And so you can see the meaning, and you can kind of see, I don't want to deviate too far, but some of the Aristotelian thought that you talked about in the past. So
let me quickly make a point on that. And folks, I'm going to, I'm done with all the things I want to say about Sullivan. So I would love to hear anything that you have. Like the point that Joe, you're making about Aristotle is fundamental. This is Aristotelianism. This loop is Aristotelianism. This is what it is, like saying that this is one thing, that there are no ideas, there is no center apart from life, that life contains life and the living being at once. It is drawn from the percepts, the concepts are drawn from the percepts for the purpose of applying them to percepts. So this flow between the spiritual and the material as being one thing, that is what Aristotelianism is about. So great point, please go on.
yeah, no, that was where I was going. It was the idea of flesh and spirit, how they coexist with one another. And he actually mentioned something with matter.
Yeah, I mean, I would
previously.
make it stronger than that. It's not just coexist. It's like they need each other. That there is no flesh without life, and there is no life without flesh. So it is one thing. It is an organism. So he calls it organic. He's saying, so Aristotelian, when you say something is Aristotelian, it is organic. That means it has flesh and life together.
And you can kind of get from there to the four causes very clearly. Like you can get from the matter and the forms to the agency, like to the efficient and to the final cause. So no, I mean there's quite a bit to capture that this diagram is really kind of, and it reminds me also of what I won't go too deep into this, but this, what you were showing us with when you mapped Aquinas
Mhm.
and when the word became flesh. So yes.
Thank
Anyway.
you. Thank you, Joe. Maritza, what do you think?
So I kind of forgot what I was going to say before, only because you put up the loop, the oval type shape that almost looks like a flower.
Mhm.
And you pointed out that the one part of the loop was form and the other was function. And I love the visual because it means if I forget that I need a function, I just keep going straight. And I love that as a visual because it totally ties in what you're saying, how we're not thinking of thoughts or expressions or tasks as good or bad because we have them, and they, thoughts come in all facets. But the check is in your thoughts, in which part of the loop are you? And so I really like that. Like if you go off the rails and you just keep going straight, well, now you fall out of the loop. And I really like that. So that's I got so excited by that imagery that I kind of forgot what else I was going to say. But it's I just thought that was great. I love that loop there.
Thank you. Rupali, how was this presentation?
It brought so many aspects of Montessori, Louis Sullivan, of Bhagavad Gita, values, how to lead a moral life, how to lead your life to the fullest. It brought all those points to a better clarity for me. So I really liked it. I also enjoy the beauty of your diagram. I almost wonder if the outermost circle should be thinner in its width, because then you disappear into, you're just gone. If you keep going in that direction, you're not contained in that circle also. So that's just a suggestion. In terms of Louis Sullivan's work, I've read this chapter before, and it was really good to hear it again and understand it better. The whole idea is that actions are integrated with your values, with your character, that the inner flower is bigger with larger, healthier petals. And if you make your flower with the longer petals, that's you're not as strong. So anyhow, those are my thoughts. I really enjoyed this presentation. Looking forward to face-to-face next time
Yes,
we do it.
absolutely. Next up is Marco, and then Iris, I'm going to ask you for your thoughts because you're seeing it for the first time. Marco, go ahead.
So like expressions is would be like a piece of artwork. But you said like going outside of that circle, like outside of the inner, the gray circle, like is bad. So like, why is it? Yeah.
Sure. So the way it is that it's like we're looking for expressions that support our soul, that makes us be more inspired. There are all kinds of expressions that are possible, which do not lead to anything, which is kind of distracting you from things. It's saying the greatest of art actually speaks to the core of our being. So if the art that you're producing doesn't speak to the core of your beings, then it's going to take you away from it. That's what it means.
Thank you.
Thank you. Iris, what did you think?
This is all so new to me. I don't really have comments. I want to listen to it again. It's
Sure.
interesting. And
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you. All right, folks, any other comments? Any other comments? Okay. So I thoroughly enjoyed doing this. Evenik, did you have a comment? What did you think? No? Okay. All right.
I can tell you what I thought, but I didn't have a comment.
No. Just what you thought of this entire, folks. I'm just asking, what was this like having, kind of talking
So
about
it's
so
a,
much of Louis Sullivan? Go ahead.
so with Louis Sullivan, I'm so new to it. It's a lot to take in, and it's so many different works. I'm like, Iris, I'm gonna have to go back and listen to it again. But it's great. I think I love the new diagram. I think you can see every aspect and you can use it to see where you're at. Like, are you going by the frame or are you looking at yourself in the mirror? And I think it's a good way to plot where you are. So I think it's great, but I think it's a great way to plot where you are and you know, but it is a lot to take in,
Yes.
especially with all the different works from Louis Sullivan. And some of them I got and some of them I didn't. So I'm just kind of like trying to absorb it all.
Wonderful. Thank you. Let's go with Maritza next, followed by Joe. Maritza.
You know, I have to say, I really enjoyed seeing this diagram through the lens of the concepts of the powers. And I'm hoping that you do another one of these and go into detail from, the in the autobiography of an idea, he talks about the worker, the inquirer, and the chooser.
Yes.
And I would love to see that triangle type of concept. And you touched upon it here, but I feel like I want to see more. I like the concept of the germ and the seed of power. I really enjoyed hearing the way Rue Polly brought in the concepts from Montessori. And it's just, the idea of it, the center, which is, I really like that being the I, the identity, the seat of power, the power to will. It really does make it a more real and tangible type of a diagram to me.
Wonderful. Thank you. So a couple of things. I definitely want to do this. I'll try to figure out, because that was the original plan. Original plan was to go through these pages from, I picked them up. So it was from 264 actually to 280 from Autobiography of an Idea, which is far more detailed view of this. But I thought that it would be better to kind of ease into it by giving the general context of how Sullivan approaches it. And both these books, like I thought the piece from The System of Architectural Ornament did a fantastic job of it. And the Democracy on the Kindergarten also did a very kind of short way. So it's like multiple ways of going through it. The largest one is going to be that. So I'll figure out, how soon I can do that. And I definitely am going to do that. Because for me, like interfacing with Sullivan, again, in the light of this diagram, has been just profound. Because what I'm seeing is that, his mind is far more fluid than mine. So he's able to kind of go through things just in one sweep, where I have to kind of plod through it a little bit. I can follow it once he does it. I can say, oh, yes, that's the way to do it. But he's better. I mean, the toughest part is to look at the social implications of this, which I have not even begun to look at. And he looks at it in great amount of detail, because, just think about it for a second. What if everybody that you're dealing with was like this? What kind of interaction and what kind of possibilities are there? So just opening that up is a huge, huge topic. And he has talked quite a bit that the entire book, Democracy, A Man's Search, is about that. So it is. So I want to interface with that at some point. So there's just so much to do. And I'll definitely do the Autobiography of an Idea. Next up is going to be Joe. Oh, wait a minute. Katie had a point. Let's, Katie, what did you have?
Yeah, my point was that I think when you're saying the potential of it, I think what Rupali had said earlier about, you know, the integration between the two, it's like when the two integrate, when your values and however you're showing it, you know, your actions, your tasks, your habits, when those two are integrated. But I think that's what's happening is when the two are, maybe you have a value, you're holding values, but the outside doesn't reflect or something, you know, that's where the I like the word disintegration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's another word I like is like resonance and dissonance. So it's like if outside world is focused on whatever is there in the culture, regardless of kind of the truth inside you, then there is going to be one kind of behavior. So I absolutely agree with the kind of integration and disintegration. Sullivan has the ability of thinking about integration between people who are operating like this, and what are the consequences of it, and what are, you know, the upside of that. He has some really profound things to say, and at some point I want to go into that as well. Joe.
There are a couple things. I mean, major takeaways that I have. The first thing is what Brian had said. I thought was really actually profound. He said that if he had read these paragraphs that you had read, that he would have maybe blown past them. And what this diagram actually does is it captures the depth of everything so that you're not necessarily blowing past. And you can kind of, it really does capture everything. It's not just Louis Sullivan. I mean, so, and Rupali's examples of how the Gita and the Karma Yoga and all the yogas have actually fit into this diagram really is, you know, it's quite profound. So, I mean, that's, you know, my major takeaway from this is that not only on a number of levels is that this diagram allows you to, when you're reading these things, kind of look at them differently, look at them in a much more deep way. And it captures other philosophies that you can see in that, and it allows you to make connections much faster. So, I mean, this diagram, by reading this text and having the diagram up and kind of mapping it out for us, it becomes very clear as to the depth of the words that Louis Sullivan is using. And for people that just read it like myself and would have blown past it, and I'll include Brian on it since he already mentioned it. So people like Brian and I'm sure Brian's probably shuddering by hearing me say that, but no, that it brings context. The visual aspect of it brings context. So this is very powerful. And I now understand what you mean is that everything has to fit into this diagram in order for it to work. Like, so that's why it's a lot of iterations and a lot of, really well done. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate, you know, all the comments. I'm just delighted that Rupali could make it, because, you know, she has lived, you know, as an architect and a big fan of Louis Sullivan. She's been, you know, and I really like the kind of the depth and the breadth. It was wonderful to have Joe, of course, Evanik, Maritza, you know, Jang. I mean, it's just amazing to get feedback for people who have immersed themselves quite a bit into this, you know, into Louis Sullivan and works, and of course, you know, everybody else. Really appreciate that. Rupali, you had something? Okay. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a nice evening. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.